When it was his turn, my father-in-law's name was called, and he disappeared into the exam room with the nurse. However, when I tried to follow, the nurse stopped me. Suspicious, I was led in the opposite direction of the exam room and taken to a separate room. There, a slender doctor was present, and his sharp eyes fixed on me intently. Then, as if making up his mind, he began to speak.
How much do you know?
Excuse me? Not understanding what he was referring to, I stood there with my mouth agape.
Oh, sorry. I mean,
His hesitant reply made me more suspicious. What was he trying to say?
Really, you're as inarticulate as ever, Mike.
When I turned my gaze, there stood my husband, who was supposed to be on a business trip, like a statue. Why is he here? Ignoring my confusion, he said.
I want you to see this.
As he spoke, he operated his smartphone and showed it to me. What? No way, why? I widened my eyes and stared intently at the screen. My own pottery, which I had made, was being sold on an unfamiliar website. Shock and turmoil mixed, confusing me. Of course, I had no idea about it. Who on earth would do such a thing? I felt more sad than angry, a whirlwind of emotions in my heart.
I need to check something with Mike about my dad.
That caught me off guard. What does he intend to check about my father-in-law? I eagerly awaited my husband's next words. My name is Jade. I live with my husband, Kevin, and my father-in-law, Raymond. Raymond, the weather is nice today. The azaleas in the garden are starting to bloom.
Is that so? Is it that time already?
My father-in-law, smiling gently next to me, is actually blind. I knew he had poor eyesight for a long time. His vision gradually narrowed as the edges of his field of view darkened. Without knowing the cause, his treatment didn't progress, and he managed with his wife's help. However, his condition rapidly worsened after he lost his wife. Neither Kevin nor I ever imagined that he would lose his sight so quickly. Kevin said he couldn't leave Raymond alone, living by himself blind. That's right. It's dangerous to be alone.
There have been fraud cases recently, too.
Kevin and I discussed it and decided to move in with him. By the way, Raymond can't work, so now he's living on disability benefits. This was arranged by his late wife, and a substantial amount was regularly deposited into his account. It seems it was withdrawn little by further, but a considerable amount remained. We could have hired a home caregiver with that much money, but Raymond refused. Don't waste money, he insisted. I quit my job to take care of Raymond. My boss regretted losing someone as capable as me, but it couldn't be helped. I decided to work part-time a few days a week and take on caregiving and all the household chores.
Jade, I'm really sorry you had to quit your job.
I expected it. Don't worry about it. How about you?
Yeah, actually, the company has decided to expand overseas, so I might start traveling more.
My husband works for a manufacturer, but I hadn't heard about him traveling abroad before. Isn't that great? I was thrilled, but Kevin seemed somewhat down.
But, I'll miss being with you, Jade.
He sighed softly and trudged off to the bathroom. It was the first time I'd seen him look so dejected. He's usually all smiles, and rarely talks about feeling lonely. So his remark was unexpected, and it took me by surprise. Was my enthusiasm a mistake? As he mentioned, from the next month, his business trips increased, and naturally, he was away from home more often. I was busy every day preparing meals for Raymond, cleaning the house, and working part-time. However, while shopping at the supermarket, a thought struck me. Caring for Raymond was easier than I had expected. When we first moved in together, I thought I'd have to help him with bathing, illumination, moving around the house, and when going out. I assumed I would have to feed him since he couldn't use cutlery. But in reality, he can take a shower and use the restroom on his own. He eats fairly neatly with a spoon. He walks smoothly around the house and doesn't stumble on napkin holders or anything.
It's easy because I'm used to the house.
He would say with a smile. Surprisingly, he can even perform simple operations on his smartphone. He uses voice recognition to make calls and look things up. If I heard talking in Raymond's room, he was discussing Johnny Appleseed with AI integrated into his smartphone. I hardly use my smartphone for anything other than calls and messages. Still, regular checkups are necessary, and Raymond attends them regularly. But whenever I suggest going with him, he strangely prefers to go alone. But there are crosswalks. It's dangerous.
It's fine because they make noise.
And getting on and off the bus.
I can do it by myself.
Pouting, he puffed out his cheeks and stumbled out alone. Worried, I secretly followed him once and saw that he indeed crossed the street alone and managed the bus without any problems. Later, I found out he navigates using his smartphone's voice guidance. Raymond stubbornly tries to do everything by himself, almost as if he's trying to keep a distance from me. However, it's fortunate that I'm not overwhelmed by caregiving and housework alone. With some time and emotional space to spare, I was able to try out a pottery class nearby. It was only a one-day experience, but I enjoyed it immensely and quickly got hooked. Since then, I've started teaching myself a bit at home. I bought a pottery magazine and read an article that caught my eye. It said that small pieces could even be fired in a home oven. As I read further, it seems there is indeed such a type of clay. Everything needed can mostly be bought at dollar stores, making it easy to get into pottery at home. I decided to sneak in sometime and try it out in the middle of the night. Back in elementary and middle school, my art grades were pretty bad. Me, starting pottery of all things. Every day was exciting, and I even found myself humming. One night, as my husband came to the kitchen for water, he saw me kneading clay while humming.
What are you making? Giant cookies.
He pointed at the light brown clay, flattened out on parchment paper. I was spreading it out to make a plate.
Oh, I thought it was a midnight snack.
Sorry about that, but please have a look when it's finished. Good night, he said, and went back to his room. He would be on a business trip again tomorrow. He seemed like he wanted to talk more, but perhaps out of consideration, he left quickly. It felt like we were somehow missing each other, but not that we were on bad terms. A strange sensation. To shake off that feeling, I focused on my pottery. Initially, I made simple shapes like plates and napkin holders. But as I got used to it, that wasn't satisfying enough. Yet, I couldn't make real pottery pieces. While pondering what to make, a gust of wind scattered the papers and envelopes on my desk. I had forgotten I left the window open because it was the afternoon. Oops, I hurriedly picked them up and pressed them down with a nearby jar. That's it. A paperweight might be small enough to make. Thinking it wasn't for a show anyway, I decided to make it with a light heart. Something stylish would be nice. As I kneaded the clay, an image of the cat we used to have come to mind. We had rescued the stray and named him Belle, and my husband and I cared for him dearly. I decided to model the paperweight after Belle. Once I thought of it, the idea came quickly. What did his face look like? His hands, his feet, his tail? I gradually remembered. In a photo on my smartphone, Belle, with his split bangs, didn't seem to mind being held by Kevin. Back then, the three of us had fun times together. Belle is over the Rainbow Bridge now, and I wonder if he's doing well. The Belle paperweight, after much trial and error, was finished in about a month. I was so pleased that I wanted to show it to someone. Just then, I had plans to go out for lunch with friends, so I brought it along to show them. They took out their smartphones, saying, "How cute!" I was surprised at the positive reception. Next to the pasta dishes at lunch, Belle's somewhat contented expression had a certain charm. My friends asked if I could make one for them too. Really? It's just amateur homemade stuff. Turns out, that's exactly why they liked it. The next month, I brought a few more Belle weights, each in a different pose. My friends each took their favorite, and I was left with one of Belle washing his face. A week later, I realized that one of my friends, who had taken a Belle weight, had been trying to contact me multiple times. She said that after she posted about the weight on social arts network sites, she received dozens of emails in just 3 days. Most of them were asking, "I want one too, but where are they sold?" I was surprised by such a reaction. I hadn't expected it. My friends kept encouraging me to sell them online, insisting they would definitely sell. But I hadn't made them to sell. I only thought of it as a hobby, and the idea of turning it into money made me uncomfortable. Plus, I'm not tech savvy, so I had no idea how to go about it. I only check my smartphone every 2 or 3 days for messages from friends. While I was pondering what to do, the inquiries kept increasing, surpassing 100 emails. Feeling somewhat guilty, my friends started insisting on paying me properly. I felt like I was the one who should be apologizing. I've instructed them to reply with "not for sale" to any messages on social networks. At another lunch, the topic came up again. Maybe I should just accept enough to cover the material cost. I'm not trying to make a career as a pottery artist. That's enough, they agreed, and happily contributed that amount. Kevin was also interested in the small figurine. When he came back from a trip, he found the Belle weight on the desk and exclaimed,
Wow! Is this Belle? Did you make this?
He picked it up between his thumb and forefinger and brought it over to me, looking pleased. Yes, doesn't it look like him?
Awesome! It's cute. It looks a lot like Belle.
When I mentioned it had become a bit of a topic online, he beamed.
Selling online is easy. Just set up a site, post some photos.
Ever heard of easier said than done?
I'll help out. I'm still an active salesperson, you know.
He patted his chest, all eager. He started muttering about e-commerce sites and strategizing. But selling means starting a business. And I wasn't confident I could start that lightly. I'm really not interested in selling. I took the bell weight from his hand and put it back on the desk. Besides, look, I'm not good with this internet stuff.
I'll help you with it.
Ah, by the way, I finished that plate I mentioned. I'll bring it here. I turned around and opened the storage cabinet in the kitchen. I couldn't see what expression Kevin had on his face. When I returned from the kitchen, he had disappeared. Only the weight of Belle washing his face was left on the desk. Belle, what should I do? Belle didn't answer. It seemed as if he said, do whatever, meow, while continuing to wash his face. On a day when the sky was filled with scattered clouds. As I returned home humming, Raymond asked, did something good happen today? That day, I had shown the pottery teacher the bell weight. I had casually mentioned my pottery to Raymond, but it hadn't been a topic of conversation before. I went to show the pottery piece I talked about before to the teacher. Sitting in a chair in the living room, Raymond listened intently to my voice.
Oh, what kind of plate was it?
It wasn't a plate this time, it was a figurine. As I said this, I felt something was off. What did Raymond just say? Beside me, smiling, he spoke again.
I wish I could do pottery too.
Excuse me? I was taken aback, but I saw this as a great opportunity. It could be a chance to bond with Raymond, who seemed to be keeping his distance. Then, maybe he wouldn't have to cross streets alone, which could be dangerous. You can do it, I'm sure. Raymond, you seem to be good with your hands. There are people who paint, even though they can't see. I let Raymond touch sample plates and napkin holders and taught him to mold the clay into similar shapes. Because he can't see, he repeatedly confirmed the shapes with his fingertips while kneading the clay. He seemed to find the texture, coldness, and softness of the clay refreshing and enjoyable. He continued making them even while I was at work. When I returned home, several creations were lined up on parchment paper. Though somewhat misshaped, each was charming. Wow, these are good. I carefully took them to the drying rack, making sure not to disturb them. As they dried, I baked each one in the oven. While spending time this way, I noticed another oddity. Oh no, the bell that I left here is gone. The weight of Belle washing his face that should have been on the desk was missing. I also realized that the rabbit and frog figurines and napkin holders that were supposed to be there were gone. When I asked Raymond, he mentioned he might have accidentally broken or thrown them away.
I always carried them around as samples. I'm sorry.
Is that so?
I'm really sorry. Because I can't see even the cat figurine.
With a disheartened look, he hung his head, and I couldn't press him any further. It's okay. Maybe, just maybe, gnomes took them. I said this with a laugh, trying to lighten the mood. Even with such a childish remark, Raymond seemed relieved. His creativity continued, but I began to notice a clear unease in his actions. When I mentioned this to my husband, he looked incredulous. I'm usually not here because of work or business trips. He mumbled, clearly puzzled. During those unsettled days, the date for Raymond's regular checkup arrived. My husband had been out since morning on a business trip. It seemed that through pottery, Raymond and I had become somewhat closer, and today I was able to accompany him. We arrived at the hospital before noon, took a number in the waiting room, and waited our turn. The receptionist seemed to be talking about something while glancing our way. Or perhaps I was just being paranoid. Rethinking it, I focused on the pottery magazine I had brought. Soon it was Raymond's turn, and he was called into the exam room with the nurse. However, when I tried to follow, the nurse stopped me. Why, I wondered. Since it was my first time accompanying Raymond, perhaps they were checking my identity. While I was puzzled, I was led in the opposite direction of the exam room and taken to a separate room. Inside, a slender doctor sat down and handed a clear file to the nurse. After the nurse left, the doctor turned his gaze toward me. His name tag simply read, Mike Myers. His sharp eyes intently fixed on me, and he began to speak as if making up his mind.
How much do you know?
Excuse me? What was he talking about? Confused, I just stared open-mouthed at Mike. I assumed it was about Raymond's vision, but something seemed off. It's my first time accompanying him to the exam, so I'm not sure what you mean.
Oh, sorry. I should have explained better.
His hesitant reply increased my suspicion. What is it?
Because,
He suddenly looked behind me. Turning around, there was my husband Kevin, standing there assertively, though he was supposed to be on a business trip.
Really, you're as inarticulate as ever.
I couldn't hide my surprise as he sighed in exasperation. Kevin, why are you here?
I had something to check with Mike about Dad.
The mention of Dad caught me off guard. What did Kevin need to check with Mike about Raymond? From the way he casually referred to him as Mike, they seemed to be quite close. Apparently, they've been friends since their college days.
I have something I want to confirm too. Ma'am, it's about Raymond.
At the word, ma'am, I suddenly became flustered.
Please tell me about his usual behavior.
Asked about his usual behavior, I described everything from the time he wakes up to when he goes to bed. He can take a shower and use the restroom by himself, and he eats his meals properly. He also goes to his regular checkups alone and enjoys chatting on his smartphone at home. As I described Raymond's everyday demeanor, Mike nodded in understanding. I also mentioned that Raymond recently started pottery and is very engaged with it, even when I'm not around during the day. I showed Mike photos of Raymond's pottery works that I had taken with my smartphone. His recent works are well shaped, and the awkwardness is gone. Mike hummed softly as he looked at them.
Is there anything else? Particularly, have you noticed anything unusual about Raymond's behavior?
Asked this, I paused to think. The only thing that comes to mind is his insistence on doing everything by himself, even though he's supposed to be completely blind. It seems like he's trying to keep a distance from me.
Understood. Anything else you are concerned about?
Well, actually, I remembered. Just a few days ago, some of my pottery works had disappeared from the house. When I asked Raymond, He said he might have accidentally thrown them away because he couldn't see. But that stuck with me. Going back a bit, there was an unease I felt just before he expressed his desire to try pottery. I mentioned to my pottery teacher that I was going to show him my pottery piece. But at that time, Raymond had asked, "What kind of plate was it?" Both start with a P sound, so I thought it was just a minor thing, I reasoned. Yet, he seemed to clearly understand it as a plate. It was as if he had seen me making plates before and knew about it. Then Kevin started speaking.
I want you to see this too.
As he spoke, he operated his smartphone and showed it to me. There on the screen was a photo of the Bell paperweight that I thought was lost. Looking closely, it had a price tag and appeared to be listed on some sales site. What? No, why? I widened my eyes and stared intently at the screen. Despite not remembering posting it, why is it here? A mix of surprise and turmoil swirled in my mind, confusing me. I felt more sadness than anger swirling in my heart.
You really didn't know about this site or that your works were being sold online, did you, Jade?
I nodded solemnly to my husband's gaze. No, I have no idea about this. Who could have done this?
We'll find out soon.
He murmured meaningfully and made a phone call somewhere. Mike nodded firmly, watching my husband. Not understanding what was going on, I watched them both.
Hello, is this the police?
Seeing my husband calling the police, I was dumbstruck. The story goes back 2 days. My husband was introduced to a site selling cat figurines during a break with a colleague at work. Curious, he was told to check out a figurine that caught his interest.
He showed it to me because it's rare to see a design of a cat washing its face.
He instantly recognized it as the Bell weight I made. The seller's information claimed they were selling the works to fund stray cat rescue activities. The artist was described as fully blind, which gave Kevin a bad feeling.
The artist's name is Raymond, blind, and the figurine looked familiar.
He said, "There's only one person who could have had access to it."
It's unlikely Jade is involved. You're not interested in selling.
Kevin also remembered the odd feeling I had mentioned.
If I hadn't listened to Jade, I wouldn't have noticed. Maybe Dad.
Maybe he can actually see.
He hesitantly said. Mike took over.
Just 2 days ago, Kevin contacted me about his father. He was really surprised when I said I was handling it.
Mike had doubts about Raymond's vision. He appeared blind during examinations, but his walk and movements suggested otherwise, as noted by the nurses.
I don't want to suspect a patient, but
He said this with his eyes downcast, when suddenly the hallway erupted into noise. As we hurried out of the room, there was Raymond being questioned by 2 police officers who had arrived. He was shouting something, seemingly in a state of panic. "Raymond?" As I started to rush over, Kevin grabbed my arm to stop me. Immediately after, Raymond shook off the police officer's hand and dashed away at full speed. In the waiting room, there were many patients, and colliding with them would not have ended well. Yet, he elegantly dodged not only the chairs in the waiting room, but also the patients and nurses sitting there. Like a soccer player weaving through opponents before a goal. While everyone was taken aback, 2 police officers quickly chased after Raymond and caught him in no time.
Let me go. I can't see.
His cries were in vain, as it was clear he could see. The police officers made Raymond stand up and took him away for questioning. Later investigations revealed that Raymond had created and operated a fraudulent sales site. This site sold his works, as well as some of mine. It turned out that the motive was money, but the claim that it was for stray cat rescue funds was a lie. He confessed that he did it because his pension was not enough to live on. After the commotion at the hospital, the local media came every day, requesting interviews. The story of Raymond faking blindness and deceiving even his family to sell homemade cat figurines became a bit of news. "Sorry, I can't answer that," I would reply through the intercom every day. As for Raymond, he was looked at coldly by the neighborhood and hardly ever came out from under his covers. At a loss, we decided to ask for help from his brother, Terrell, who used to be a self-defense officer known as a fierce instructor. Though he is very kind-hearted, his strong sense of justice made him furious about Raymond's actions. Despite living 3 hours away by train, Terrell came charging over with a furious expression.
Completely shameful. I'm going to straighten you out at my house for a while.
He yanked the covers off and grabbed trembling Raymond by the scruff of his neck.
Terrell, please stop. I don't want to go outside.
Raymond pleaded, crying, but he was no match for Terrell, known as the fierce instructor. "I'm sorry for the trouble," was all Terrell said before he left with Raymond on the train. Raymond had always been submissive to his brother, Terrell.
There's no way he can do any harm now. This should make Dad live honestly from now on,
Kevin said, looking sad. "It's for the best." Kevin immediately shut down the website Raymond had created. But unexpectedly, something happened online.
Today, that colleague told me.
Even though the site was supposed to be closed, photos from the site were being shared on social media by someone who had seen it. Compared to Raymond's cat figurines, mine were noted for their gentle expressions, becoming popular because they seemed to reflect the personality of the maker.
The colleague now wants a bell weight too.
Excited, Kevin seemed very pleased. "But the site is closed, and I'm not really into online selling,"
About that.
Kevin said, cutting in quickly. A friend of his colleague runs a local craft store. The shop owner, a woman who had seen my work on social media, expressed her interest in selling it in her store. However, she had trouble contacting me because she didn't know my details. "By this neighborhood, do you mean that stylish shop on the corner?"
Yes, exactly. Maybe you could visit tomorrow.
Encouraged by him, I decided to visit the shop immediately. The shop owner, who wore many cat accessories, was clearly a cat lover. I agreed to her offer, and we decided to display my work in her store. Later, I brought over not only paperweights, but also figurines and plates to display. I felt a mix of slight joy and anxiety about whether they would really sell. I marketed the pieces under the artist's name, Verticat Bell, and they began to sell one after another. Often, they would sell out while I was still making more. The earnings were just pocket money, but they filled me with surprise and joy. I decided to donate a portion of the proceeds to stray cat rescue efforts. I thought Belle would be happy about that. This donation initiative led to increased interactions with others involved in stray cat rescue, and even local artists. The pottery teacher sometimes visits too. My days are fulfilling and enjoyable. Now, they call me Belle after my beloved cat. It feels a bit odd to be called by my cat's name, but I believe it's a connection that she helped forge. Right, Belle? I gazed at the Belle paperweight, washing its face on the living room table.
I'm home.
Kevin had returned home unnoticed and approached with a beaming smile. What's the occasion?
Today is our anniversary and the day we first met Belle.
As he spoke, he placed a box of cake next to Belle. Oh, that's right. Overwhelmed with happiness, I instinctively hugged Kevin. Belle seemed to smile and say, "Do whatever, meow," while continuing to wash its face.